A recent poll shows that young people are progressively voting more in favor of the Democratic Party. Changes in society and racial diversity are among the reasons young Americans are swaying away from the Republican Party. The poll indicates that young Americans are far less conservative than in past years. Our reporter Ryan Oliver has more on these changes in voting patterns.
A recent poll taken by Gallup.com shows that young Americans' affinity for the Democratic Party has grown as their affinity for the Republican Party has significantly decreased. According to Gallup, 18 through 29-year-olds do typically align themselves with the Democratic Party, but have become more likely to do so since 2006. I spoke with a couple millennials to see if they were surprised with young Americans favoring the Democratic Party.
It doesn't surprise me that millennials are moving towards the Democratic Party because I think that our generation does not subscribe to certain traditional ways of thinking.
I actually don't find it to be a surprise at all because as the U.S. grows and becomes more diverse, then we start to deal with a lot of families with lower incomes, and these families with lower incomes appeal more so to the Democratic Party opposed to the Republican, which believes in, more so of a keep the rich rich.
Facts show that millennials are far less conservative than young adults of a decade ago. The Gallup poll also suggests racial diversity among young Americans is a major factor in these changes as well. For District Wire News, I'm Ryan Oliver.
And according to a Gallup poll, many 19 through 26-year-olds are moving towards the Democratic Party. We have Dr. Pilar McKay, a professor of public communication at American University, and Fatah Carva, a public affairs graduate student at American University as well, to discuss this topic. I'm happy to have you both here. So just to get started, why do you think, Dr. McKay, why do you think that there are so many younger students lingering towards the Democratic Party?
Yeah, we're seeing this in this generation. We call them the millennials. It's a large cohort, just like the other large cohorts have leaned progressive as well. You have the World War II generation, voted very heavily for FDR, and then you have the boomers, who were really the generation of the civil rights movement. So we're seeing another large cohort come through the United States, and they're indicating that they have the same kind of behaviors. They are positive towards government. It's maybe not even a big or small government. They believe in the government. We're also a very diverse generation, which means we have high measures of tolerance, and we understand what's going to happen, in the future, and we are comfortable with that. So those are some of the things that are happening, and we know that the Democratic Party espouses some of those visions as well. It's the vision of having LGBT rights and minorities going through the education system with affirmative action. These are all things that are natural fits with millennials.
And what do you think are some of the biggest issues with these millennials?
We're going to be seeing issues about economics. This is a generation that is struggling. They're starting their professional lives, but also kind of our social causes and social issues. We are a more diverse population. We want everyone to succeed, and that's what's really interesting about this millennial generation.
And Fatah, for you, hearing those issues, what is one of the most important issues to you, if not a few?
For me, I would have to say that education is definitely one of the most important issues and how that relates to immigration, which is also another topic that is increasingly popular with our generation. As we've grown up with globalization and seen how it's impacted us, that's essentially what has brought apart so much of the diversification that we see with our generation. So those are two of the main important issues for me.
That's great. And then focusing more towards the Republican Party, what do both of you suggest that the Republican Party can do to attract more voters?
I think that a lot of it has to do with just the general rhetoric. I know that the Democratic Party appears to seem more progressive and it seems more forward and always transitioning, while a lot of the values of the Republican Party stem back to bringing the old America and reforming and going back to the traditions. And a lot of those traditions don't hold as much anymore for our generation. So I think it'd be interesting to see them try to work and progress towards something different.
I agree with Fatah. We're seeing the Republican Party have more and more outreach to Latinos and other populations. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of cycles. Will they continue this outreach and have it really be an inclusive idea, or will they continue going along the same paths they have in other elections? And it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
It was interesting because last year I did a story about Tacoma Park, Maryland, and they allowed 16-year-olds to vote. Do you think other cities will take on this, and what are your thoughts on it? Fata, you're giving me that face like, I don't know.
I think 16 is a little young in terms of really finding out your own personal foundations and what you value in terms of looking for who you would put into office. I think that essentially these values are developed as you grow, and I just personally think that's a little bit young.
What about you?
If 16-year-olds can work, and I believe probably in Maryland they do get work permits, they should maybe start to exercise their freedoms to vote as well. It'd be really interesting to go into the literature and see what happened when we reduced the age from 21 to 18, and if we're going to see the same things from 18 to 16. But I think it's always great to have more people involved in the democratic process if they're younger. That's really great too.
That's great. Thank you all both so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, President Obama is making the dream of many immigrants a reality with the DREAM Act.